So we've got some really good things to get into, and just like we saw beforehand, sometimes we have to understand that we're broken. And in order to see that we need the Father, we need to get to a place where we really have to realize that we need Him. Sounds redundant, but it's true. Because if we don't reach out to Him, if we don't realize that we need Him, we're not going to reach out to Him. And so sometimes the Father will help put us in positions and put us in situations where we will reach out to Him. And in that process, we get restoration. And restoration is a wonderful thing. Because when we see in the Scripture, when someone was restored, do you ever notice that they always ended up being better than they were in the first place? I think when the Father restores us, He just makes it just a little better, just to show us of what He desires for us. You talk about Job. He went through a lot. But when he was restored, he had so much more than before. And I'm not just talking about things. I'm talking about he was a joyful guy. So these are the things we're going to take a quick look at. We're going to talk about restoration and what's required in restoration, the act of restoration, and just how all this fits together, and what the Father's trying to teach us, and go into all that. And we're going to take a look tonight at a person who dealt with restoration. And that's Nehemiah. Jerusalem was under attack, and they knocked down the walls. And a walled city is for defense, right? A walled city is for protection. It's for safety, and it's for so you can keep out what doesn't need to be there. Well, when the walls are breached, when the walls are knocked down, guys, you're in trouble. And so we have to have a wall. Now, I know we've been told that you're not supposed to put up walls. Knock those walls down, right? But there are certain walls that we need because they are there. Why do you put fences up around your property? Well, it's twofold, isn't it? Things that you want to keep near the house, you want to stay near the house. You don't want your dog running off and running out, right? And then there's also what you want to keep out, you gets to keep out. So it's twofold. Sheep go in a pen. Why? So they don't go just straying and running off. And it's for safety and protection as well. Because when they're all in one place, the shepherd can keep a good eye on them. So when something tries to come their way, he's there to help protect them, right? So that's a few things that we're going to take a look at. We're talking about restoration in Nehemiah, and we're going to see some things that I think we can apply to our life today in this process. First thing we need to look at is we need to acknowledge that there's holes in the wall. What do I mean by there's holes in the wall? There are things that possibly in our life that we may not realize where we have holes in the wall, where we may be letting things in that we don't realize we're letting things in. Kind of like you start seeing birds in the house, there must be a door open somewhere, or a window, or something, right? So we need to understand that there's holes in the wall. Okay? We need to make places to repair and take care of these things. We got to be alert. But here's the thing. No matter what, we need to remain faithful. We need to persevere. Because much like you guys have heard already a couple times tonight, God never said it was going to be easy. And He never said that it was just going to be a piece of cake and just, no, but He gives you hope in the midst of no matter what you go through. Knowing that whatever you're going through, you're going to go through. This too shall pass, right? So this is what we're looking at. You have to understand, you got to be faithful. You've got to stay in there. Because do we serve God only when things are going well? Or do we serve Him no matter what? We serve Him because of who He is and because of the relationship we have with Him. We do not serve Him because of what we can get from Him. Because if we are serving Him because of what we get from Him or what we feel from Him or anything like that, let's just call it what it is. You've made Him an idol. We need to serve Him no matter what. It's not a matter of, fair weather friends. God's my God only when He blesses me. No. Matter of fact, It seems to be the opposite of what generally happens. I mean, historically, when people got into a position where they were blessed and things were going well, they forgot who put them there. And then they turned their back on God. And then they got to a place where they had to fall, and then they had to cry out to God saying, I messed up. And hey, at least they got there. Because we all need to get to that place where we realize we need Him. And if there's something that you're going through in your life right now where things are hard or things are difficult, understand this. The Father loves you. He desires to be there with you. And sometimes we do need to go through things. But it doesn't mean that it's stopped who He is. And it doesn't mean that He's stopped what He desires for you. We need to acknowledge that we live in a fallen world. And that was our fault, not His. Adam, he sinned, and he brought in sin into the earth. And we're reaping the consequences of that. But we can bring restoration in the midst of that. And that was the Father's plan, to bring restoration. All right? So here's a couple things. In seeking restoration, the first thing that needs to be restored is you. To help others, you need to be well. And here's something I want to be extremely clear on. I'm not saying you got to be perfect, because nobody is. I'm not saying you got to get it all together before you can do anything for anyone else. What I am saying is that you need to be restored before you can have a healthy relationship and trying to help restore somebody else. You can't bring somebody to a place where you haven't been. If I'm giving you directions to New Jersey and I've never been there, you're going to be in trouble. Of course, why would you go to New Jersey? Dahlia, why? So, the first thing we need to acknowledge is that we're broken. And I think if we're open and honest with ourselves, we can definitely see areas in our life where we're all broken. Okay? And we may feel, I'm more broken than the rest of these guys, and I got more problems than anyone else. And let me give you one thing, and rest assured, you're not. And you don't. Everybody has their own problems and situations where they need help. And let's not put ourselves in the place where we look at somebody else and try to be judging of where they're at, because that's not where we are, because they could do the same to you. Let's actually get in a place to work restoration towards one another to help restore the kingdom. We need to be kingdom-minded. We need to work towards what the Father desires here on earth. On earth as it is in heaven, right? So when we understand that the Father is bringing restoration to your life, and He wants to restore you, and He wants to do all of this great stuff in you, then we can work on restoration on His kingdom. And that's what He desires for us. Okay, Psalm 31:12 says, I am forgotten as a dead man out of mind. I am like a broken vessel. Do you ever feel like that? I Psalms, because that I love a lot of the Psalms because they're just open and honest. If David was having a bad day, you knew it. And so we need to be real. I mean, we've been told many times that you got to watch your confession, you got to be careful. And I agree, we need to be careful of what we say. But let's not put ourselves in a situation where we're not being honest. There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm having a rough time today. Because then we know how to pray for one another and how to help each other. But if we say, hey, how are you doing? I'm great, I'm blessed, I'm fine, and really we're hurting, we're not doing ourselves any good. And we're not doing anybody else any good either. So we need to learn to be honest with each other. And why are we not honest with each other? We need to learn to dwell in unity with one another. And if we're broken, hey, we're broken. That doesn't mean that we constantly are in this cycle of, I'm just broken. No, because we need to work towards restoration. Okay? If something is broke, fix it. That's the process. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Psalm 38:8. I am feeble and sore broken. I have roared by reason of the disquietness of my heart. You ever lay before the Father like that? Psalm 69:20. Reproach has broken my heart, and I am full of heaviness. And I looked for some to take pity, but there was none, and for comforters, but I found none. I was having a really bad day and really down on myself, and I was just really miserable, and there was nobody there to lift me up. See, they don't love me. That's where we go, but that's not the case. Maybe the Father is trying to show us that we need to rely on Him to lift us up. Granted, we do need each other, but we need to come to the place where we realize we need Him more than anything else. We all face discouragement. Right? You ever get discouraged? Nah, never, right? We all get discouraged. Let's be honest. There's times in life when things aren't going quite the way that we think that it was going to, and we had certain expectations and things didn't happen that way, and it's easy sometimes to get discouraged, but we need to understand, don't stay there. Don't stay there. Because the Father is desiring to have that closeness, that relationship, that unity of heart, mind, and purpose that He's desiring for you. You don't have to remain discouraged. Let's look at a couple scriptures. 2 Corinthians 4:1 says, Therefore, seeing we have this ministry as we have received mercy, we faint not. The Father gives us His grace and His mercy every day. That's exciting. Because, truth be told, we wouldn't be able to stand without it. We wouldn't be able to be alive without His grace and His mercy being extended to us every day. So it says that we receive mercy and we faint not. Now, what does it say, we faint not? What does that really mean? We don't give up. We don't lose heart. We're not going to be discouraged because we understand the Father is merciful, He is gracious, He is compassionate, He is loving, and He's full of kindness, and He desires for us to walk with Him. And if we're having a hard time with that, He is patient, and He will draw us back to Him. 2 Corinthians 4:16. For which cause we faint not, but though our outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed day by day. Now here's something. So though the outward man perish, the inward man is renewed day by day. Notice he says the outward man is still perishing. So those things are still happening. Things are still going on. The outward man is still perishing, but the inward man is renewed day by day. To me, this kind of fits like when Yeshua turned to Peter, Kepha, and he says, Peter, I got to pull you aside. I got to tell you something. Come over here. I got to talk to you. I just wanted to let you know that Satan, Hasatan, has desired to sift you like wheat. He wants to really work you over. What did he say next? Did he say, and I rebuked him so he can't touch you? No. He said, I pray your faith doesn't fail. And then he says, and when you return, what? It's one of those, wait a minute, what'd you just say? Kind of things. Because he says, Satan has desired to sift you like wheat, and I can imagine him saying, you have my attention. And then he says, I pray for you that your faith won't fail. He goes, well, okay. I can handle that. I can deal with that. And then he says, and when you return, encourage your brothers. Return? What do you mean return? Where am I going? You just said you pray that my faith won't fail. So what's happening? I kind of picture something like this going on. But understand what's happening. Yeshua was telling him what is going to happen, and you're going to have a rough road. But there's always restoration. You've never gone too far to turn around and come back to the Father. There's always restoration. Ephesians 3:13. Wherefore I desire that you faint not at my tribulations for you, which is your glory. Luke 18:1. And he spoke a parable to them. This is the end, that men ought always to pray and not to faint. Now there's something for us. If we're in prayer, then we won't get so discouraged as much. If we're in prayer, we won't lose heart so easily. Because we feel distant from the Father when we're not having a relationship with Him. When we're not talking to Him, if we're not reading the Word, we're going to feel distant from Him. But if we're staying in the Word, and if we're praying, and if we're being faithful, if we're seeking, together, and we're talking about the things the Father is desiring for you, and we're talking about the Word, and we're talking about His heart towards His people, we're talking about the kingdom, it's going to be harder to fall. Because the things that we're excited about, we're going to stay excited about. And like hot coals, we're going to light off each other. Right? All right. So we have in Scripture something where it talks about the sower sowing the seed. And there were different types of ground that the seed was sown into. Now the seed was good seed. It just went into different types of ground. Right? One of these types, we find in Mark 4:18-19. These are they which are sown among thorns, such as hear the word. So he's saying there's a word, which the seed is the word. So there's a word that is sowed among thorns, and so these are like people that hear the word, and then, what? The cares of this world, the deceitfulness of riches, and the lust of other things entering in, choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful. So here's something. When we say, and the cares of this world, that doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. The cares of this world could be something as very simple as you got to work your job. You got bills to pay. The car, the house, the kids, the spouse. All of these things are just part of life. But if these things become your pursuit above the Father, they will choke out His life in you. And you won't be walking in His life. Deceitfulness of riches. Because this is kind of like the progression. If we're pursuing the cares of this world, then we're in the deceitfulness of riches. If I could just do this extra bit, or take this extra job, or work the extra hours, sometimes we need to do that. Times and seasons for everything, guys. But if that's our norm, and we're not spending any time in the Word because we're too busy with other things, if we're not spending any time in prayer because we're too busy with other things, then your priorities are out of whack. And it leads to the deceitfulness of riches and lust of other things. You work the job to get the money so you can buy the stuff, and then you have the stuff so you need to work the job so you can get the money. And it's just a cycle that just continues. So how do we rebuild? How do we rebuild ourselves, and how do we rebuild each other? Enter impressive, wasn't it? Enter Nehemiah. Yeah, wait, no, what's next? He heard that the walls were down, they were breached, they were destroyed, and they need to be rebuilt. And his heart was to go back and rebuild, but he was kind of stuck where he was. And he needed a route to go in so that he could go back and rebuild. And the Father was faithful, and He gave him everything that he needed to do what he had on his heart. Now notice, God did not come to Nehemiah and say, Nehemiah, I am charging you to rebuild the walls. This was just on his heart to do so because he knew it was right. He knew it was needed. And he said, if no one else is doing it, I've got to do my part. If no one else is doing it, I've got to do it. And God made a way. Now understand, when he went back to restore the walls, this was a very difficult road. This was a very difficult task to do. This was not something easy. And let's face the facts. Not everyone's willing to help. Right? This is kind of like one of those things where when Israel was exiled into Babylon and they came back from Babylon, there were people who stayed in Babylon because they were comfortable there. They had jobs, they were doing well, they were doing all right, but they were in exile. It wasn't home. How about this one? There's a lot of opposition. Did you ever notice that when you really set your heart to follow the Father, and you're just really going to go, all of a sudden these people who don't have nothing to do with you no other time start coming at you, and they start attacking you, start trying to draw you away into other things. You know why that is? It's a distraction. Be careful and don't let the distractions happen. If you have a resolve within yourself that you're going to serve the Father and you're going to do what He's asked you to do, don't let things distract you. Because let's face it, if we're distracted, that's our fault. It's kind of like we're walking down the road and all of a sudden we see all these signs and all these things. Guys, there's a world out there that is trying to get your attention. The thing is, what are you focusing on? As you're driving down the road, are you focusing on the road or are you focusing on all the signs on the side of the road? Maybe that's why I-4 was just declared the most dangerous highway in America. If you didn't know that. There's a lot of opposition to what the Father wants to do in your life. Let's not help the opposition. Let's be kingdom-minded and working with the Father and desiring what He desires for us. So, we're going to read Nehemiah 4. And you can write that down and you can go back and read it at another time. Nehemiah 4. Let's look at a couple things. Now when Sanballat heard that we were building a wall, he was angry and greatly enraged, and he jeered at the Jews. And he said in the presence of his brothers and of the army of Samaria, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore it for themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they finish up in a day? Will they revive the stones out of heaps of rubbish and burned ones at that?" This kind of sounds like a recent newspaper, doesn't it? This kind of sounds like the political climate of what's happening in Israel right now, doesn't it? There's always been opposition, guys. It's not anything new. Verse 3. Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, "Yeah, look at what they're doing. Look at what they're building. Hey, if a fox goes up, a fox could knock down the wall. They're not going to be able to do anything right." They're mocking, they're jeering, and they're discrediting what the Father is doing in their midst. Verse 4. "Hear, O our God, for we are despised. Turn back their taunt on their own heads, and give them up to be plundered in a land where they are captives. Do not cover their guilt, and let not their sin be blotted out from your sight, for they have provoked you to anger in the presence of the builders. So we built the wall, and all the wall was joined together to half its height for the people who had a mind to work." Now there's something right on the end of it. It says, "For the people who had a mind to work." Was this a matter of the people who wanted to come out and supervise? See, everyone wants to help as long as they don't have to actually do anything. By helping, I just want to be in the area and be in the vicinity. No, they had to actually pick up some stones and actually get to work. Because the wall wasn't going to get built any other way. Right? This is where you thank God for young men. Verse 7. "But when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs..." Stop. I ain't saying more. "And the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that repairing the walls of Jerusalem was going forward and that the breaches were beginning to be closed, they were very angry." They were angry because there was restoration happening in Jerusalem. And they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion in it. Confusion is a battle. The adversary, if he can come in and if he can confuse you, then you're not going to be able to discern truth. So confusion is a battle. It's a spiritual one at that. A lot of times confusion goes hand in hand with rebellion. Verse 9. And we prayed to our God, and He set a guard as protection against them day and night. So they prayed, and they set a guard. In other words, they prayed, they understood that Yahweh is the one who's going to fight for them. He's the one who's going to work things on their behalf. He's the one who's going to do everything that He said. But at the same time, let's not be silly. Let's station guards around anyway. It's like, understand, the Father will look out for you, but sometimes you do need to take action. And so that means we've got this world we live in. We know the world that we live in. We know the situations that happen. We need to be alert. It doesn't mean we stop doing what we're doing. It means we need to be alert. Verse 10. In Judah it was said, the strength of those who bear the burdens are failing. Now think about this for a minute. The strength of those who bear the burdens are failing. There is too much rubble. By ourselves we will not be able to rebuild the wall. So the people are now coming to the point that this is in Judah. This is the people who were trying to work on the wall. They're stopping and they're looking. They're saying the strength of those who is bearing the burdens is failing. The people who were supposed to be the strong ones and leading and the doing and the helping, their strength is being pulled away from them because there's too much rubble. And he says, by ourselves, we can't do this. Well, they got that part right. By themselves, they can't do it. But Bezrat Hashem, but with God's help, by His strength, they'll do it. Verse 11. And our enemies said, they will not know or see till we come among them and kill them and stop the work. At that time, the Jews who lived near them came from all directions and said to us 10 times, you must return to us. They're trying to stop the building, trying to stop the restoration. So in the lowest parts of the space behind the wall, in the open places, I stationed the people by their clans, with their swords, their spears, and their bows. I thought they went there to do a construction job. They did. But understand, anything that you're doing for the kingdom is going to be a battle. Because there's a world and there's an adversary that doesn't want you to do it. So anything you do for the kingdom, there's going to be opposition. There's going to be a battle. If you're trying to do something and everything just seems to be gliding through there, I'm not saying that God's not blessing. I'm just saying keep your eyes open, because that's when you slack off. That's when you're not paying attention. 14. And I looked and arose and said to the nobles and the officials, to the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. He's encouraging the people, saying, you know what's right to do. You know this is it. And let's not lose hope. Don't get discouraged. Let's keep doing this. So, we saw and we read that the strength of the bearers of burdens is decayed. What does it mean when it says the strength of the bearers of burdens are decayed? It means they're overtired. It means they're overworked. They're stressed. They're discouraged. They don't have the strength to stand, and they want to give up and run. Vince Lombardi said, fatigue makes cowards of us all. It just wears you down and wears you down and wears you down where you don't care anymore. Don't get discouraged. And I know just saying don't get discouraged doesn't fix it. I'm telling you, we need to learn to do what David did at Ziklag. He had to encourage himself in his Lord and know that He was the one that gave him strength. David and where they lived, their village, their town, their city, whatever, it was plundered and people were taken away and stuff was gone and stolen and gone, and there it was. And they come back and now David's men are so upset about what happened that they want to kill David. Because where they were at was attacked while they were away. So David has enemies, and now his brothers want to kill him. And I kind of see this, just as they were about to pick up stones, David said, you know what? No, I am not accepting this. And he stood up, he got on his horse, and he pursued those that took away everything from him. And he overcame. Not because he encouraged himself in his own strength, but because he knew who his God was. He had this whole Goliath thing going on. When no one else would stand and face Goliath, he was like, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? David. Yeah. So he says, why are they fatigued? Why are these things happening? He says, because there's much rubbish. So what's the rubbish? Frustration. Things of like, oh, it's just, the task is just too much. It's just too difficult. There's so much that has to change. It's just never going to happen. The rubbish, it's all the negative things, all the things that the adversary is trying to whisper in your ear to get you to give up. Don't rubble. Don't mix with the rubbish. The Father has some other things for you. We need to listen to the words of the Father. Listen to the words of He who is faithful, and not listen to the lies of the adversary. Because it's rubbish. And I'm saying that to be polite. So where it says we're not able to build the wall. Why? We're staring down and we just think it's just going to fail. We can't do what's needed to make it. This is what they were saying. They came and they tried to, their people came and tried to discourage them from rebuilding because they're like, you guys just give up and come back to us before you end up dying because they're going to come and attack again anyway. It's just too much. The task is too large. It just can't happen. Be careful of making a declaration of failure in your life. And like I said at the beginning, it's one thing to say I'm having a hard day or I'm struggling with this or that or the other thing. It's one thing to confide in someone and to talk to them and just tell them what's happening in your life and where you need help. That's good. That's biblical. That's scriptural. But it's another thing to get up and say, well, I guess I'm just going to get beat up today. That's different. Don't go there. Because if that's your mindset, that you're convinced it's going to happen, and you're just going to let it happen. This is where we need to set our minds and set our hearts and the focus on the things that the Father is giving us. Those whatever scriptures. What are the whatevers? Whatever things are pure. Whatever things are of good report. Whatever things are lovely. Think on these things. And if that's where our focus is, you ever hear that a person becomes what they behold? That which you spend your time meditating on, that's what you will become. And that's not some new age thing, guys. That's what Scripture tells us. So if we're spending our time meditating on the Word and talking about the Word and talking about the Father and talking about the kingdom and talking about His goodness, what are we going to get out of that? Guys, it's going to produce good fruit. And it's going to produce good things in our lives. And here's the great thing, it's going to produce good stuff for those around us too. Proverbs 24:16 says, for the righteous falls 7 times, and he just wallows around in it. Nope. See, here's something that we can find encouraging. It says that the righteous man still falls. So what happens is, it's not a matter of, I fell, I might as well just give up because I'm just going to fall again. No. He says, though a righteous man falls, he gets back up. He says, the wicked stumble in times of calamity. It's the wicked that won't get back up, but the righteous, though he falls, will get up again. And that's the emphasis. Doesn't matter how many times you fall, just keep getting up. Right? All right. It says, from all places whence you shall return unto us, they will be upon you. So this was fear. This was fear talking. And it's easy to speak fearful when we're not focused on what the Father tells us to have faith. And understand, have faith. We talked about this a few weeks ago. Have faith, it's not just believe. It means understand God is faithful. Understand what He desires for you. Don't be afraid of the what-ifs. Because the what-if of life will paralyze you. Don't be afraid of the what-if and the shoulda, coulda, woulda. Keep your heart and your mind set on the Father and His Word, and whatever happens, be faithful and keep going. Let the Father lead you in that. Don't give up, You think of, it's no use anyway. Guys, don't give up. Because Scripture says in the last days, many will fall away. Why will they fall away? Because they have this idea in their mind that, well, when life gets hard, God must have left me. The idea of it's going to be an easy life because we're born again, because we're redeemed, it's really an American thing. Because you don't see that in other countries. And you definitely didn't see that with the disciples. I mean, all the disciples were martyred, guys. Yeah, they had an easy life. Right? So, don't give up. Don't lose heart. Keep your heart and your mind set on what the Father desires for you. And let His kingdom be established in your life. And you have that joy that comes with that. Now understand, joy is not happiness either. Happy is an emotion, and there's nothing wrong with it. But it's an emotion, and it comes and goes. Joy, you can have joy in the midst of turmoil. Like you can have peace in the middle of a storm. Right? The answer was present before they even started. The answer of what was happening was there before they even started anything. Though they didn't see, they had a promise. You need to hold on to the promises that the Father has given you. It doesn't matter what things look like. It doesn't matter, though we look in the world and it's dark out there. It doesn't matter because there's light in Him. And He's the light of the world, right? And He says that He wants that to live in you. So let it live in you. Nehemiah 4, verses 4, 5, and 9. It says, "Hear, O our God, for we are despised, and turn their reproach upon their own head, and give them for prey in the land of captivity. And cover not their iniquity, and let not their sin be blotted out from before you. For they have provoked you to anger before their builders. Nevertheless, we made our prayer unto God, and set a watch against them day and night because of them." They prayed, they took action, but they understood that God was working even though they may not see. Why pray then? If you don't believe that, then why bother praying? But if we believe that prayer changes things, and if we believe that the Father can orchestrate things for good, then pray. Right? Here's something we need to pay attention to. Don't stop moving forward. Don't stop. Because when you stop, you get complacent. Don't stop. Okay? Keep moving forward. And it says, so we prayed and we set a guard there day and night. So they prayed, but they were diligent. They prayed, but they kept doing what the Father was giving them wisdom to do. Okay, verse 15. When our enemies heard that it was known to us and that God had frustrated their plan, we all returned to the wall, each to his work. There's something. That's encouraging, isn't it? When the adversaries found out that God frustrated their plan, we went back to the job. We went back to do what we were doing in the first place. It's kind of like Nehemiah said, so they got all these guys who are wanting to come and all these accusations and all these different things that are happening. Yeah, I ain't got time for that. Let's get back to work. And that's what they did. Don't let the things that people are telling you and saying around you, don't let it land on you. Because God is faithful. Keep doing the work. Verse 16. From that day on, half of my servants worked on construction and half held spears, shields, bows, coats of mail, and the leaders stood behind the whole house of Judah. So they had half the people working and half the people stood guard. Talk about relying on your brother. Yeah, I got your back. Right? 17. So, the leaders stood behind the whole house of Judah who were building on the wall. Those who carried burdens were loaded in such a way that each labored on the work with one hand and held his weapon with the other. Think about that for a minute. So they held his weapon with one hand and they did work with the other. While they're carrying stuff and carrying these things back and forth, they carried with one hand and held their weapon with another. You know what's wild? Is when you go to Israel and you see all these people walking around in the IDF with guns everywhere, doing normal things. They're shopping. And they got a gun strapped to them. And you see, these little girls, buddy, they'll tear you up. That Krav Maga, yeah, that works. People have said when we went over there, it's like, so do you feel unsafe in Israel? No, actually I don't. I feel safer there than here. They learned the principle of you don't give up the task at hand because there's a battle coming. You're doing what the Father has said, but you're prepared at all times. This is a matter of where it comes to pray without ceasing. That means during the day, it doesn't mean that you have to pray all the time and constantly and never stop praying. It means during the day, you're saying prayers. You're doing things throughout the day to reconnect with your Father. You're doing things throughout the day just to reestablish and acknowledge Him in the day. Verse 18, and each of the builders had his sword strapped on his side while he built, and the man who sounded the trumpet was beside me. So see, they're all working together here. All right. Verse 16, from that day on, half of my servants worked in construction, half held spears. Did I already do that one? Yep. So we will keep moving. 19. And I said to the nobles and the officials and to the rest of the people, the work is great and widely spread, and we are separated on the wall from one another. So he said, though we're working and we're doing stuff, understand, guys, that there are times when we're going to be separated far from each other. So we need a plan. Because let's not be too far from each other for too long. We need to understand the importance of gathering, to helping to encourage one another, and be there to help each other fight when we need to. Not fight each other. Right? Verse 20. So in the place where you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there, and our God will fight for us. And in other words, when you hear the sound of the shofar, go to the sound of the shofar, because that's where the battle is. But that's where God is going to give us the victory. So we kept doing the work. Half of them held spears from daybreak until the stars appeared. We need to learn to keep moving forward, but we need to learn to move forward together. No man left behind, right? When Israel came out of Egypt, when they came out and the Father redeemed them and He brought them to the mountain, Scripture says there was not one sick or feeble among them. Can you imagine? Not one person sick or feeble among them. And we're talking a lot of people. We need to keep moving forward together because that's when we're strong. Galatians 6, verse 8. For he that sows to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption. But he that sows to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. Sowing to the flesh is the natural, the carnal things, or just my own pursuits, my own desires. Can be either way. But the flesh will decay. Let's face the facts, guys. Someday we're all going to die. The flesh that we have here, this body that we're in, will go back to the earth and decay. But the Spirit lives forever. So if we're sowing to the natural, if we're sowing to the things for the here and now, it's kind of like Esau. Sowing to the things here and now. Working for the things here and now. But what's important? That which was given to Esau or that which was given to Jacob? The birthright, the blessing, the promise. These are spiritual things, guys. And that was what was important. Verse 9. So let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap. What's that word again? If we faint not. And notice it says in due season. In other words, at the right time, we will reap what the Father is desiring for us to reap. But we can't lose heart. We've got to keep working. We've got to keep doing what He's telling us to do. Verse 10. So as we have therefore opportunity, let us do good to all men. It does not say let us do good just to those we like. Right? It doesn't say just do good to those who you perceive have the same beliefs that you do. No, he says do good to all, but especially those that are of the household of faith. So he is making a distinction there. He says we need to do good to all because all men are made in the image of God. It doesn't mean they all serve Him. But He desires for them all to serve Him. So we need to do good to all. but yet even more so to your brothers. Right? Back to Nehemiah 4:22. So I said to the people at that time, let every man and his servant pass the night within Jerusalem, and that may be a guard for us by night, and may labor by day. So neither I nor my brothers nor my servants nor the men of the guard who followed me none of us took off our clothes. Each kept his weapon at his right hand. That means they didn't even stop to take the time to bath or sleep was very little and shower. No, there was too much at stake. They didn't want to lose any time. Are we that committed? I have conflicted feelings about that. Are we that committed? Well, I hope we are, but at the same time, I kind of hope not. But do we understand there is an urgency? There is an urgency to the things that the Father is desiring, because the world is getting bad out there, but we need to have people being a light in the midst of the darkness. There needs to be people to show the heart and the love of the Father to those around them. And that needs to be you. It needs to be us. So how can we bring about restoration? How can we bring restoration, not just to us, but to others? How do we do this? Well, how's this? Know the promises, know the one who gave them, and understand this. God is faithful even when we don't feel like He is. Even though we may not see what's happening, we kind of get this mentality of if we don't see something happening, we think nothing's happening. Right? That's what happened at Mount Sinai. Oh, Moses has gone up on the mountain, and he's gone up there, and we don't know what's happened to him. He's been up there an awful long time. He's probably dead. Let's make a golden calf. Right? God is doing stuff even though we don't see it. We gotta keep that in mind. Leviticus 26:13 says, I am the Lord your God that brought you forth out of the land of Egypt, that you should not be their bondmen. And I have broken the bands of your yoke and made you go. He says when He brought them out of Egypt, He broke their chains, He broke their bonds. Not that they would be servants to Egypt, but that they would serve Him. He broke the bands of their yoke, not so they could go run off and doing whatever they want to do, but so that they could be upright. Which means serve Him. Because He teaches us what is upright. Because let's face it, if we go off and just running and doing whatever we want to do, we're never going to do anything that makes us uncomfortable. We're never going to do anything that we might perceive as weird. And sometimes God will have you do stuff that seems weird, and He'll definitely make you uncomfortable. So, yeah. He said, I broke your chains of bondage so that you could be upright. And that's something we need to take to heart. Ezekiel 34:27. And the tree of the field shall yield her fruit, and the earth shall yield her increase, and they shall be safe in their land, and shall know that I am the Lord, when I have broken the bands of their yoke, delivered them out of the hand of those that serve themselves of them, and they shall no more be a prey to the heathen, and neither shall the beast of the land devour them, but they shall dwell safely, and none shall make them afraid. Are we dwelling in safety, and do we feel afraid? You know, which one are we doing here? Do we feel safe, or do we feel scared all the time? If we're always walking around scared, then we need to have some more faith, because fear will kill your faith. Now, at the same time, it doesn't mean to cover your eyes and never look at anything that's going on around you. But fear will keep you from walking in what the Father desires for you. Acknowledge the way the world is, but also acknowledge how the Father wants to bring restoration to it. And we need to be a part of that. Psalm 46. To the chief musician for the sons of Korah, a song of Elamoth. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore will not we fear, though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though the waters thereof roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with the swelling thereof, Selah. He's saying, what have we got to fear? No matter what we see, no matter how horrible or terrible these things that we're looking at, what have we got to fear? No, fear God. Love Him. Follow Him. Keep His word. That's what Solomon said is the whole duty of man. Right? All right. Psalm 19. Starting in verse 7. The Torah of Adonai is what? Perfect. The Torah of Adonai is perfect, and what does the Word do? It restores the inner person. The instruction of Adonai is sure, making wise the thoughtless. So the Word of the Father, if we allow it to get into our heart, it will change us. The Word of the Lord is perfect, but it restores the inner person. If you're feeling that you need restoration in your life, if you're feeling things, then we need to let the Word pour into you. Verse 8, the precepts of Adonai are right, rejoicing the heart. When we're in the Word, our heart rejoices. The mitzvah of Adonai is pure, enlightening the eyes. If we're looking around all the time and all we see is doom, gloom, and darkness, then, guys, that's not a world problem, that's a focus problem. We need to keep our eyes on the Father and to see enlightening the eyes and to see the things that He desires for us. The fear of Adonai is clean, enduring forever. The rulings of Adonai are true. They are righteous altogether. And there we go. 10. More desirable than gold, than much fine gold, also sweeter than honey or drippings from the honeycomb. There's your tasty Torah right there. Verse 11. Through them your servant is warned. In obeying them there is great reward. Think about that. Through the word of the Father, through His Word, He warns us about the pitfalls of life. But if we keep His Word, then there's blessing, there's reward in what He desires for us. So who can discern unintentional sins? That's kind of the question. Only God can. But even sinning unintentionally is still sinning. So who can discern unintentional sins? Then He speaks, cleanse me from my hidden faults. 13. Also keep your servant from presumptuous sins, so that they won't control me. Then I will be blameless and free of great offense. May the words of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart be acceptable in your presence, Adonai, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. So, James 1 says this. James 1:22. So don't deceive yourselves only by hearing what the Word says, but do it. Because you can theorize and talk about the Word all day, but unless you're actually applying it and walking in it, it's not going to change you. Right? So if we feel like, well, I'm just really getting discouraged, but I'm reading the Word all the time, but are we taking any of it to heart and actually doing what it says? Sometimes we need to actually do what it says in order for us to realize what he's telling us, right? For whoever hears the word but doesn't do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror, who looks at himself, and he goes away, immediately forgets what he looks like. But if a person looks closely to the, what's that word? Perfect Torah, which gives what? I want you to say it. Yeah. Because we always hear that the Torah is bondage. But James says that the Torah gives freedom. Because in it is freedom. And continues, becoming not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work it requires, then he will be blessed in what he does. So James is telling us, we want the blessings, we want all these things, then we just need to read the Word and do what it says. There's blessing, there's life, there is joy in His presence, all of these things are there. And we need to just walk it, guys. We need to just live it. So, what's our responsibility? Let's get building. How many of y'all got shovels? I know a bunch of you do. I've seen them. I've used probably half of them. Let's get to work, guys. There's too much at stake. There's too much at hand. We need to be building the kingdom. Let's not be people to tear down. Let's be people to restore. The time is too short to not bring restoration. Let the Father's heart be given through you to those around you. 1 Peter 2. So put away all malice, deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander. Like newborn infants, long for the pure spiritual milk, that by it you may grow up into salvation. If indeed you have tasted that the Lord is good. So as you come to him, a living stone rejected by men, but in the sight of God chosen and precious, you yourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Yeshua HaMashiach. If you're living stones, a whole bunch of stones just thrown together is just a heap and it doesn't do anything. It's just an obstruction. A whole bunch of stones scattered and laying out all over the place are not doing anything. They're just there for people to trip over and fall and hurt themselves. But if you take stones and you organize them and put them in order, then you can build something. And that's what we need to be. If we're living stones, let's be building something. Let's not be a stumbling block to those around us. Let's not be just piled up and just thrown over in the corner somewhere. Let's be used to be building something. Let's build His kingdom. Yeah. Good? All right, let's all stand. In Numbers 6, Yahweh told Moses and Aaron that when you bless my children, I will place my name upon them, and I will give them peace. He says, when you bless them, you shall bless them like this.
Yivarechecha Yahweh vayishmerecha Yahweh Yahweh panav ilecha vichumecha Yisa Yahweh panav ilecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May Yahweh now bless you and keep you. May His face now shine upon you. May you show forth the light of His countenance, and may He